Good morning and welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Joe Taylor. This morning, another in the ongoing series of programs presented by the Regional Early Learning Resource Center. The program, through the Northwest Institute of Research, oversees a grant from the Office of Child Development and Early Learning at the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services and the Department of Education. The goal of the program is to improve the outcomes for young children as they prepare for school. John Posa from the Early Learning Resource Center is the host of the program and is with us throughout the series. And John, I think this is this the first time we've actually having someone on that we
I think
have
you're
had on?
right, Joe.
Yeah.
Yes. Early on when we started doing the program about 4 years ago, we had Dr. Judy Cameron on, and we are very pleased to have her back again. Dr. Cameron is the professor of psychiatry and the Clinical Translational Science Institute, as well as the director of Pitt Science Outreach at the University of Pittsburgh. She is a neurobiologist with a well-established research program studying how life experiences shape brain development and lifelong brain plasticity, focusing on the impact of social stresses, exercise, and nutrition. Welcome back to the program, Dr. Cameron.
I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, so pleased to have you back. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to have you back is because you were involved in a great program called Working for Kids, Building Skills. And you are the founder and CEO of this program. And for our listeners who are not familiar, can you tell us a little bit about what this program is all about?
Well, this program is an educational program with really fun learning materials. There's activities, there's games, and there's not a lot of reading. It's designed to get people to understand brain development and be able to help children have the sturdiest brain development possible, even those people who aren't particularly interested in this topic and might not stop to read things about it.
Right. And the format of it is so appropriate for parents. Again, it's for to make it easier for parents and educators, for that matter, to understand how they can work more effectively in nurturing and communicating to work with children in their brain development. Is it not?
Yes, that's exactly right. So it is a program that teaches adults how children can strengthen any skill that you want to strengthen. So examples would be reading skills or communication skills, but also social emotional regulation or cognitive skills. Any skill you want to develop, you want to work with the child to have them use that skill at a particular time when the brain areas that regulate that function are developing.
Now, you actually go out into communities, don't you, to basically kind of do an overview of working for kids, building skills, and in a very easy to understand manner. And you've actually addressed and talked about the program with community groups, with educators, parents, and that sort of as what got the program off on the ground in terms of promoting it into communities everywhere, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think I started by being a member of the National Scientific Council on the Developing Child, talking to legislators, because that council's mission is to inform legislators of how important life experiences are for children. And as we were able to talk to legislators and other professional groups, we realized that the information was really needed by families themselves, by parents, by daycare providers, by people working with young children. And the message wasn't getting all the way to that level. And so Working for Kids really provides the same information about brain development, but it does so using fun activities and games instead of a more lecture style.
I was fascinated. You mentioned games by a game, the brain architecture game. And it's interesting. Most tabletop games, and we all played them when we were kids, and then with our kids, most tabletop games stress winning. Brain architecture game incorporates losing into the game, but not necessarily as a bad thing. Maybe you can explain that.
Yeah. So the brain architecture game has become very popular. It's now been sold in over 130 countries. So it really now, after I think it's been out now for about 8 years, it has a worldwide utilization. And it's a simple game. You are dealt life experience cards, and you roll the dice to determine your genetic beginning. What the life experience cards do is they give you building materials, and the building materials are very simple. They're pipe cleaners and straws. The straws represent social supports. The pipe cleaners represent brain pathways that are developing. And your goal is to build a brain as tall as you can, which represents being a very functional brain over an 8-year period of time that the game runs. It doesn't really take 8 years. You just get 8 years of life experience cards. And in the years 6, 7, and 8, stresses that the child experiences are represented by weights. And so although you want to build the brain tall, you don't want it to collapse under the weight of stress, so you want to make it sturdy too. So the goal is to get the players to understand how valuable social supports are for children, that they're really, really needed in order for them to develop sturdy brain pathways. And almost always, if you're playing with a group of people, some small groups will have a brain that is tall and withstands the weight of stresses, but others will collapse. And so that leads to a discussion of what were the life experiences, what were the social supports, what's available in our community that could provide social support.
And one of the things, obviously, that is key to so much of your research, Dr. Cameron, is that you study how adverse childhood experiences impact children, but you're specifically going deeper in your research to determine how two children going through similar adverse childhood experiences, where one can overcome those trauma events and still thrive, and another with the same experiences does not. Tell us a little bit about what you have learned in your research to identify, what parents and others can do to help that child who may be not quite as resilient as someone going through the same experience.
Right. I think this is really important. We know that all children are not born the same. Some children are resilient by nature. Others are a little more sensitive to life stresses. And we like to think about this as a balance. So you can imagine, if you kind of put your hands out to your side, if you pile positive life experiences on one side, you're going to tip positive. But if you pile negative experiences on the other side, you're going to tip negative. Now, this difference in predisposition means that the fulcrum of the balance changes. You kind of lean a little to the positive or lean a little to the negative. And what we really want to know how to do is, how can you change the fulcrum? How can you make children naturally a little more sensitive to the positive influences, a little less sensitive to negative stresses? Because we'll never get rid of all stresses that children face, and that probably wouldn't be a good thing anyway, but we simply can't do it. So what neuroscience has taught us is that the brain functions that are developing from the front part of the brain that connect back to every other area and kind of fine-tune each area and regulate it, those pathways actually lead to resilience and lead to tipping a little more positive. What are those pathways? They're pathways that control decision-making, reasoning, inhibitory control, complex problem solving. So those all sound like things that take a long time to develop in kids, and they sure do. They start developing at birth, but they don't finish developing their brain pathways till about 25 years of age. So as a society, we have a long time to help kids develop resilience, and we want to take advantage of that.
Absolutely. And, the fact is, in your program, Working for Kids, it was very important that the building skills be built into that topic. And because the building of the skills is what can help those children to become, have more of a resiliency in overcoming some of these stresses. And you mentioned about first pathways, and it brought me to another game. Obviously, one of the things that is part of a toolkit that you've put together for those particularly who do home visits with families and children is it's called the First Pathways game. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
I would love to. We're really excited about this game. Working for Kids is a 6-hour training program. It's a train the trainer program. So Working for Kids trains social workers, public health workers, even parents or child care providers that are interested in becoming trainers, and then they can train other people in their community to give 6 hours of this information that will allow parents to work really effectively with their children to develop brain skills. But even if you've learned things once, you really need reinforcement. And so we developed the First Pathways game so that parents would have something fun to do with their children that would reinforce the messages of how to build those first brain pathways. Right now, First Pathways has over 160 activities for parents and children to do together. You can log on to firstpathwaysgame.com, and then you put your name down and register, choose a category of what age your child is, and then because it's a game, you get to spin a wheel and an activity comes up. If you're unsure how to do that activity, there are little video clips that show you an adult and child doing the activity together. And there's also information about what brain pathways get strengthened by the activity. So we really try to encourage parents to play the game every day if they can, play a couple activities, because the more the child uses their own brain pathways at the time those pathways are developing, the stronger the pathways will become. And this is a fun way. You don't have to dream up activities. The game has activities.
You know, on this program, on John's program, we deal with early childhood learning, and I guess we tend to think of early childhood learning as cognitive skills. What about the importance of a kid's social-emotional skills? Can you talk about that and how important that is as part of early childhood learning?
I'd be very happy to talk about that, because the newer research is showing that in order for kids to do well in school, the social-emotional pathways need to be well developed, and they're just as important, if not actually more important, than the early cognitive learning. If children have learned to pay attention, they've learned to take turns, they've learned to listen to an adult with instructions, they are much more likely to be able to learn in school. And even if they didn't have early cognitive preschool activities, if they've learned those social-emotional skills really well, they will thrive when they get to be school age. So a lot more attention is being given to social-emotional skills now than used to be the case. What's really interesting is people used to think that social-emotional skills just developed by themselves. But we now know that's not true. We know that just like learning to read or learning to talk or do math, that learning to have self-regulation or learning to follow rules is a learned activity. So in many ways, it's no different than the cognitive activities. You have to be exposed to situations where you get to do that, and you have to do it again and again in order to develop strong brain pathways.
And I wanted to mention again, in case folks want more information on working for kids, building skills, there's a website also, www.workingforkids.com, where they can find more information. And again, for the specific First Pathways game that Dr. Cameron spoke about, you can go on www.firstpathwaysgame.com. There's also a Facebook page for Working for Kids. So, parents can post pictures, videos of the parent and their child working together on their First Pathways game activities and get more tips about how to utilize the game. I wanted to ask you, this really has taken off, Dr. Cameron, hasn't it? And that the more I'm sure that you've seen that parents have become aware of, these more easier to do activities with their child, the more it's encouraging them to work with their children in developing their brains.
That's exactly right. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. The key is to make it fun and enjoyable so that parents and children will work on these activities over and over and over again. When each brain area is developing, it's very sensitive to how much use it gets. And the more use, the stronger the brain circuits will be. And so getting the child involved and active really matters. And the best way to do that is to make it a fun activity they can do with their parents, or if you have multiple children, that they can all do together.
And the one thing I wanted to mention about the trainer program for Working for Kids, which can be done in communities, it can be done for educators, for community leaders, is there's two options. You can have someone come to your community to teach whoever it is that you want to become a trainer in these activities, or an individual can come to Pittsburgh. If someone is interested in learning more and maybe want to come to Pittsburgh or make arrangements to have them come into their community, what do they need to do?
They can go to our website and they can send us an email. You can reach me at Judy Cameron at workingforkids.com, or you can reach all of us at info@workingforkids.com. Say that you're interested in getting training, and we will respond immediately and see if we can set that up for you.
We've been talking so far about what hopefully is a normal situation, a parent working with his or her children. Unfortunately, in many instances, too many that we would like to see, this isn't happening, and this often is in communities that are defined as stressed. What exactly do we mean by stressed communities? And, again, top of the mind, you think stressed community, you think of an urban neighborhood. How prevalent are stressed communities in rural areas? And again, what do we mean by stressed community?
Well, stressed communities can mean that the parents have a lot of life stresses. That's usually what we mean by that. And they can be very different in nature. So there can be a single-parent household. There are a lot of single-parent households. And the parent may need to be working more than one job to make enough money to support the children. So they have very little time. So we would consider that a stressed situation. The parent has very limited time. There's a lot of burdens. They're very worried about financial situations. That can happen in an urban environment, but it can happen just as easily in a rural environment. Another type of stress is that you don't have access to services that would be really helpful for encouraging child development. So it's fantastic if you're living in a city and you can take your child to the library, or you can take your child to the park, or you can take your child to a daycare or a preschool where they can interact with other children. You can imagine that that is a really robust learning situation. But if you live in a remote rural environment, you may not have any of those things close by. The child is at home on a farm or more remote, and all the burden falls to you. Working for Kids, actually, because it has games and tools that just use everyday household items, is ideal for that situation.
I wanted to ask you regarding the evaluation of Working for Kids, Dr. Cameron. How do we know and are sure that the programs are being effective once they're implemented?
Yeah, we care a lot about evaluation, and everybody does. And so what we do is we have a 5-question questionnaire that every time we train parents, we send them a link to their phone, and we have them just click true or false to 5 questions about brain development. There's a total of 4 hour-and-a-half sessions in the Working for Kids training that equals 6 hours of training. So over that period of time, they will answer 20 questions. That information comes rolling into Working for Kids, and we tabulate everybody's scores. And what we're finding is that parents are answering questions correctly 89.5% of the time. That's an astonishingly high score.
Sure is.
I'm a university professor, and I have to say, we don't have very many classes where we have university students answering questions correctly 89% of the time. So we think the program is highly effective. We have data to support that. And we're even more thrilled to find that that's the level of understanding that we're getting in a train-the-trainer program. So we train the trainers, but the 89% comes from the trainers training other people, the trainers training parents. So there's really good retention of information.
Again, we're talking with Dr. Judy Cameron on the Working for Kids Building Skills program, and the website to get more information is www.workingforkids.com. We only have about a minute left. Dr. Cameron, tell us a little bit about what your next step is, what's in the future for the program, and for our parents and listeners to learn more about it.
Well, I'll say 2 things. We're expanding the First Pathways game so that there will be activities available for children all the way up to 8 years of age, because parents asked for that. They said, we love these activities. We don't want it to stop when our children enter school. We want them to be able to keep doing them. And the other thing we're doing is the brain keeps developing till children are about 25. So we now are developing activities called Working for Teens. And Working for Teens are fun activities that teenagers can do to strengthen those really important brain pathways for developing lifelong resilience to stress.
Fantastic. Great program. Thank you so much, Dr. Cameron, Dr. Judy Cameron, for being on the show talking about Working for Kids Building Schools. Hope to have you back again.
I hope so, too.
And that's our program for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks at this same time. In the meantime, you can go online to learn more at papromiseforchildren.com. For John Poza and the Early Learning Resource Center, I'm Joe Taylor. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.